Greetings, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to this latest edition of Tales from Outer Space, where I take stories from across the internet and read them for your entertainment. This particular story is called An Answer to Why, written by MyNameMeansBentNose. An Answer to Why. Yao Enshin flinched as the outermost psi cluster failed against the assault. He felt the tendrils of his face curl, and he couldn't help but gnash his beak at the following pain. The harvesters had crushed another line of defense. The news was late, of course. Such things did not travel in between instantaneously. Millions of minds had died, and other paltry sums sacrificed in an attempt to slow the advance of the harvesters. Another failure to halt the machines as they converted literally all they could reach into more resources for their star shell system nodes. A paltry sum compared to how many had already sacrificed themselves. Putting a hand on the smooth shell in front of him, Yao Enshin drew comfort from the warmth of the egg. He opened his eyes as the mental pain and anguish receded, hoping the feedback didn't bleed into the mass experiment taking place on this world. The eggs had become very warm with the potential of the lives within, the seventh of such attempts. The Colin Thune were not an aggressive people. Uninterested in expansion, they were happy to live their lives in study and contemplation until it was time to move on. The harvesters of the budding galaxy mind had forced the Corinthune to act. Yao Enshin looked out across the great hall, just one of many cavernous holes that held a portion of the billions of eggs of the seventh successors experiment, another small portion of this purpose-built station. But then, it had been a long time since his people had made the effort to convert a place for habitation. Simply building a small moon was much easier and vastly more efficient, a factor that was yet even more important when time was in short supply. Time was running out on this experiment, although truthfully, it had run longer than the others. There was little left to slow the advance of the harvesters. The process was well theorized and understood. The harvesters traveled from system to star system, disassembling all lesser planets and building star shells, swarms of satellites, to gather all that the stars of the systems could produce. Each star shell then became another node in the expanding mind of the ascending race that had created the harvesters. If they had so wanted, the Corinthune could have done the same, but these people were not an aggressive people, uninterested in expansion. It was time to move on, then they would do so. But not without making an attempt to create a legacy, not without striking out despite the mind that devoured all, devoured with no care to the fate of those destroyed in the process. Utilizing old theories of their own, the Colin Thune had built moons, stocking them full of incubators and energy reserves, and started to work on creating a legacy. On each moon, a race was created, given an abundant world to germinate upon and a small galaxy to play in, although with little company to test them. Beyond their home galactic cluster, only that which they looked upon would be fully simulated. The first were peaceful, so very much like the Colin Thune. They thrived in the world, expanded into a full star system given to them, and settled for their lot. They too welcomed their time when it came to them. A failure. They would not survive the harvesters. Full of grief, Yao Enshin had witnessed the end of the first attempt. The Colin Thune halted the simulation, and the peaceful children were placed in slumber, hopes high that they would live again. One does not abandon their children after all. The second had been full of wrath and hatred in an attempt to create something more aggressive. The second was made so angry they killed themselves barely after developing agriculture. The bloody feuds they fought did not end until their own blind rage left them vulnerable to nature itself. The third succumbed to natural disaster, the creatures of the world unable to evolve past the rigors of what they lived upon. The fourth survived, but constantly failed to develop past their primitive, naive nature. They remained simple creatures. The fifth splintered into variants and fought against itself until finally arriving at a catastrophic nuclear ending. The sixth simply took too long to leave their home system, burning time and power on the Corinthune successor system. Again, with hearts full of grief, Yao Enshin's superior, Nairogois, had ended the simulation. The sixth was simply too slow to survive the rigors of reality. like the first attempt. They would be born proper if the Corinthian had a chance. Still, something more was needed. But the seventh, this one showed promise. In their hope and despair, Pyoention and his associates clung close to the eggs, risking the psychic bleed made possible by their proximity. But the newest soldiered on, creatures of endurance and dissatisfaction. They pushed themselves forward. And so the simulation ran, but not for much longer. The warmth of the egg soothed Pyoention's soul. Tracker coast. Why did it have to end like this? He shouted to the sky once again, hoping against chance that someone might hear him. Coast wasn't a young man, having survived the rigors of forest and weather as he hunted game for the pack. He was a tracker, and a good one. He raised a skilled son and 2 beautiful daughters, and had seen them all matched well and given all they needed for them to build their new lives. But he wasn't done yet. There was still so much to teach. There was another grandchild on the way, and every hand was needed to eke out a healthy life. He glared at his smashed legs, even as they throbbed with pain of his tumble down the ravine. His son should still be above. Ghost shouted again to the sky, only to be answered by a low grumble and the snuffling of a beast. Ghost looked at his side and blanched with fear. A brown one, seeking food for the winter sleep, and it had found him. Why did it have to end like this? Sheep heard a din. The sound of whirling sling changed the snap as he fired the stone at another of the wolves. The stone found flesh, and the wolf yelped with pain, but Din knew that wouldn't scare them away. He resumed his jog, fumbling and dropping a stone from his pouch as he ran. Din shouted again, even if he knew it was in vain. They'd told him this would happen. Next time you cry wolf, we won't come, they warned him. While trying to fish another sling stone from his pouch, another wolf burst out of nowhere with a snarl and a snap, and tore at the back of Din's legs to shreds. He shrieked as he fell, and the wolves were on him. Why did it have to end like this? Midwife Sella. Even knowing all she knew, Sella could feel it going wrong. Her mother and her mother's mother and her mother's mother's mother, as far back as memory reached, they'd all been midwives. Sella grunted and gasped with pain, lost in the moments between wakefulness and despairing childbirth. It was a first, but it felt wrong. Her mother's eyes were full of fear. Sella pushed with what she had left, even as she heard them whisper of all the blood. Sella looked her mother in the eyes, full of grief and knowledge that their family line would end here. Why did it have to end like this? Piker Knowles. With wide eyes, the man on the other side released the spear. Knowles staggered back and looked down on the length of wood upon which he had been impaled. The din of battle around him echoed distantly in his ears. With shaking hands, Knowles grasped the spear and jerked. He grunted with pain, even as he started to shiver with cold. His hands, red-stained, were so warm. This didn't make sense. They outnumbered the bastards 2-1. They were supposed to be winning. The strength left Knowles' legs, and he looked up to see his killer taking a gleaming point of the spear to the neck. The fear in his killer's eyes matched the fear of Knowles' heart. Why did it have to end like this? Builder John. A rope snapped, and a sudden slack threw John onto his backside. He didn't even have time to register the load of wood coming back down until it landed on him. John couldn't even shout in pain. His last thoughts were of his wife and his daughter. What would they do without him? Why did it have to end like this? Daniel Potter. He cinched the rope tight and wobbled for a moment. The action tugged a dark laugh out of him. From where, he didn't know. But then it didn't matter anymore. He kicked the stool away and he dropped hard. Distantly, he felt satisfaction of the foresight of going to the washroom so he didn't defecate for the first person to find him. So lost in his misery and the relentless emptiness of life, even his last thoughts lacked the relief he so wished for. His last thoughts were miserable wonderment. Why did it have to end like this? Hajit Muhat. He was a hero. He'd lived the life, one of the first of clinical immortality. Hajit had taken the time to live up to the potential and all their expectations. Hajit had flown the Enterprise on its maiden voyage. His crew, the lucky first to circumvent the speed of light. They found a new home for humanity and returned celebrities. Hijit remained in space for decades until technology moved past his current knowledge. Seeking the next stage of his life, he trained himself on civics to become the first immortal and the first Muslim president of the Greater United Americas. Free of concerns for his personal future prospects, his 2 terms were blessed with prosperity and deceptively large numbers of successful reforms. But then, those terms ended with the realization that even an immortal wasn't free from disease. Sarah hadn't ended her own extinction treatment when she realized that Hajit's time was limited. He had lived a blessed life, and yet he still felt the pangs of regret. Hajit smiled his last, his eyes full of love for his only wife, yet died with a secret thought hidden in his heart. He was supposed to live forever. Why did it have to end like this? Unknown. She opened her eyes and saw naught but white. But he died. She, everything was a mess. Countless strange memories bounced around in their head, trapped. The white was a shell. With a shot of fear, they struck with all their might. They already died once, twice, countless times. All their deaths paraded through their head, full of loves and hates, satisfactions and regrets, and always wondering why. Her fist went through the shell with a satisfying crunch, and a large crack spiderwebbed out from the newly made hole in the shell. Hers. She was a she. Her memories didn't mesh. She could clearly remember being a man and a boy, but a different boy, and another girl, and a eunuch. Their memory scared her away for a moment. It flickered to one who'd changed their gender to live a happier life. Then another who'd done the same, only to later step off a stool to hang from its own noose. Her memory then moved on to one of the most recent and one of the happiest selves. Her memories were tragic as much as they were happy. She pushed on the shell, and it cracked again and broke away. You are the first to wake. She looked to the source of the voice, then recoiled in fear. Ah, Cthulhu! The cerulean-skinned alien looked at her with barred pupils, and the tendrils around his mouth shook. Not quite, Thune. Not quite. I am a Karlan Thune. My name is Sayo-Enshin. He blinked at her, and she could feel his mind churning. He also seemed to be swaying oddly in place. You've awoken before your aggregate memories could settle, and I see we could not entirely prevent a psychic bleed. Alas. She blinked in confusion, then suddenly thought to check herself. A band of snug metal covered her modest chest, and she seemed to be wearing a skin-tight bottom. She looked back at the friendly-seeming alien. None of her memories, including aliens, xenos, or really any life not originally from Earth. Aggregate? I remember dying. A lot. Is this the afterlife? Are you here to take me? Afterlife? Technically, yes. Time has run out, so the simulation is coming to an end. Speaking of which, he waved at the eggshell in front of her. Please don't leave your egg quite yet. It is helping tune your memories for what you feel is most valuable. It is a complicated process. Feeling no reason to disagree, she sat back down as she wrestled with the countless memories of past lives flickering through her head. Setting into the bottom of that shell did settle her mind. Still, despite the march of ages through her mind, she felt incredibly healthy and alert, as healthy as the last fully augmented life when her life had been extended to the full theoretical limit, along with the many improvements to her natural-born body. She flexed her arm and felt the telling crackle of enhanced muscle over infused bone, with all the instant feedback and accelerated nervous system. How do you wish to be called? She looked up from the swaying alien. I'm sorry? With all those memories, it is easy to conclude that you are reborn, but all of those lives, starting from the first conscious human, was simulated. This is your true first life as near-immortal human. Wait, those lives weren't real. She knew this of the simulation theory, but she felt a small wave of shock was rushed across her. Do you feel as if those lives didn't matter? She met his eyes, black barred pupils surrounded by green and yellow irises. Suddenly, she realized she could feel his mind. He'd left it open to her, wary only in the same way one is wary of a child taking the first stumbling steps. He felt as if those lives mattered. He and others like him had simulated an entire history of her race and had seen it to those lives could live again. I'm the first, for sure? Yes. It was corny. and just loaded with symbolism and history. But then you can call me Eve, and Eve always likes her fruit. Why all of this? A legacy. This galaxy is being rebuilt with no consideration for us. The broad outline has already been given to you. Eve sat back and considered. She could already feel the mountain of memories settling, a great foundation of life experiences supporting generations of wisdom and imagination, unplanted like a flag at the slope of a mountain, a bundle of knowledge suffused with the markers of the Korlin-Thun mines. So, Eve muttered, half to herself, engaging in that ancient practice of thinking out loud. So a K3 civilization in the making is converting all the star systems in this galaxy to Dyson spheres for their own use, yes? Your terms are different than ours, but yes. Okay, and they could barely care less for who lives here. But you guys know you aren't willing and able to fight them, so you created a legacy in us. The body, the projection of Pio Ensign faded out of sight, and his true body stepped into the same place with easy grace and steady acceptance. Yes, and what do you do with that legacy is up to us. You just hope that we can make room for your other children. Payunshin bowed low, his head just visible above the edge of Eve's shell. Please. Muhammad, I still can't believe you picked Eve, he whispered conspiratorially. Okay, Muhammad, she giggled back. Although if you prefer, we can go back to Sarah and Hajit. That is one of my very best lives. Mine too. But maybe you keep those names private times. He felt her smile melt away, and his face too turned serious. In another world, another reality, she might have asked if the decision they, humanity, made was right. But they had been born complete, with countless lifetimes of joy and hardship. There was no question here. Together as one, partners once again, they spoke. A single pair in an endless multitude. They spoke what every human knew, and every Corinthian knew. He spoke first. Every generation of humanity that loved and lived, that hated and died, has been born again. We remember them all, from the earliest rock figure to the space-spanning explorer. She spoke next, and we all knew there was more than we could see. The cracks, ever so fine, still let the light of truth show through. In our anxieties and our fears, we asked, why? He spoke again. Always we wondered why. What gods, what intelligence would create such a world as that which we knew? In the depths of our hearts, we always questioned what meaning there was in our living. She continued, and here we are, given as much wisdom as could be gifted, yet all it earned across countless lifetimes. We have been offered a legacy and a future, for us to do with as we please. Together, they spoke. It was all for this. End of story. I'd quickly like to thank the T5 peeps. Cold War Boomerwaffen, Severin Cerberus, Bushmaster 177, Henry the Red, Caspar Arnholtz, Cold War Boomerwaffen, Elijah Silvercross, Dragzoon WRE, and Severin Cerberus. Thank you very much.